Calling this meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council informational meeting to order, Monday, October 19th, 2015. First item on the agenda today will be a staff report from our Legislative Operations Manager, Jim David.
Good afternoon, Jim David. Earlier this year, you had passed a resolution that approved your legislative priorities, or actually your provisional priorities, before the start of the Municipal League Conference. That was held earlier this month, and there were several new items that were added to their policy statements. And so in front of you, you should all have their policy statements that they did approve. Some just to bring to light as you consider your final resolution, which will be brought probably in November, is number 46. This was adopted in the Public Works Committee, and this basically closes a loophole that exists in South Dakota state law regarding annexations. It basically could put cities liable for any type of public improvements. Number 47, there was also another item there that would prohibit any, it basically says legislation to prohibit creation of any entity with municipal powers within 5 miles of any existing municipal boundary. This is basically the Community Improvement District, or CID. Number 53, the Municipal League supports allowing municipalities to rebate the property taxes, or their portion of the property taxes, to homeowners. This was brought by some of the smaller towns as a way to incentivize new home creation within their towns. They would rebate a certain portion of the property taxes to incentivize people to move into their community. It was left very open, very broad, and we'll see if they come forward with a law or a proposed bill on that. Then number 71, this supports expansion of Medicaid in South Dakota. Number 86 supports repealing the sunset of the increased 911 surcharge. Number 125, they support, this was an item that originally started in your provisional resolution, and it allows a local option or a BBB tax to be issued by counties to support their funding needs, such as public safety. This was passed, and interesting to note that this was brought forward by Yvonne Taylor with her discussions with her counterpart with the counties and some additional cities and additional counties. They had thought that this would be an item that they could unite around, but then the counties did go to their convention and instead are supporting a sales tax for them. So the Municipal League had decided that they would continue to have this in their policy statement as a good faith effort to show the effort that they had made with the counties. And then 133 is legislation to support basically removing the property tax, the 3% limitation on property taxes. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions regarding that.
Any questions from the council? Seeing none, thank you, Jim. All right, we'll move on to City Council open discussion. Do we have any items for open? Councilor Erickson.
Just to give an update on public services, I know I'm not on the agenda, but we met last week, and I think a lot of you were here. We talked about food trucks and the ordinance coming forth for food trucks. One of the areas that Adam Roach did ask from us is to weigh in on hours of operation for the food trucks. That any of it's up for negotiation, obviously, with the City Council, but that's one area that he did ask for more input as far as the hours of operation, and I would encourage us all to kind of think about that and have conversations. The second item we talked about was Councilor Urbanbach presented the potential restrictions of a handheld ban on, let me start over, a cell phone ban on handheld devices with a few different exceptions to the rule with Bluetooth, emergency medical, etc. It is, the stuff is online as well if you'd like to take a peek at that. We did talk about those two items. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has questions about that. And then one more item, if I may, Mr. Chair, is I had the opportunity to meet with staff with Regan Smith and discuss emergency management response. And so kind of what we looked at is, and what they have been looking at is an app or information in regards to being able to get high information, very emergency information to the hands of constituents and to the hands of those that live in Sioux Falls. One of the options would be Code Red. Another one is Everbridge. Places like Des Moines, Iowa has this currently, and so I've intend to reach out to them to see what it looks like. But we've started those conversations, and it's something that they've been looking at for a while, and it's something I wanted to start looking at, and so we met with Mr. Smith, and we intend to bring that to Public Services to talk about what do we do in the case of emergencies, and what defines an emergency. Are we talking about an imminent threat to the public? Are we talking about a water main break? Are we talking about a storm? What does it look like? And so he will be coming in front of Public Services in the next few months and presenting to us what they currently do and how maybe this Code Red or another type of software could enhance that and getting the sensitive information to people as quickly as possible. So just throwing that out there and giving it as a heads up that will come in the next few months.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council, statements? Okay, Councilor Jameson.
In regard to that emergency notification discussion, I remember when that sewer main broke over by the penitentiary, and we were at City Hall, and we were trying to figure out just how we would tell those individuals on the west side to avoid using water or flushing the toilet because it was going to overwhelm the system. And I know that there was a struggle then on how to communicate that message. So I think there's probably a lot of good things to come from further discussions there. I just remember standing at City Hall, and we all looked at each other like, well, how are we going to tell them to stop using any water? And I think they wound up using emergency vehicles, police department broadcasting from their speakers, I thought. Anyway, it's probably a worthwhile discussion, I guess. I would support that. I had another item, if I could.
Please continue.
So you guys remember when Mark Cotter was here and we did a supplemental appropriations on the several projects that he brought forward? Remember that? And one of them was the adaptive traffic signals for 41st in Minnesota, and that they were going to save some money by putting them both together. And I had asked him then, well, how much more could we save if we added 12th Street in there? I found out that implementing 2 adaptive traffic signal systems within the city at one time is enough for them to handle, and they would just as soon not have a third. So talking through with Mark, we did come up with 2 other projects that he would like, or that would use that $300,000 that we have in unobligated funds on a couple of road projects. $100,000 for concrete pavement restoration, $200,000 for asphalt rehabilitation, milling and overlaying. And so in the future, near future, look for those amendments to come as a way to use those funds. Plug those dollars into the 2016-2020 capital plan. So we still have a way to improve our roads. It would just be the 2016-2020 plan, just so you know. As you know as well, because it's out that far, certainly other projects could be identified. So these are just my ideas. I know Dave Bixler had asked for input. These were some of the ideas that I came up with. Improving the roads, and so I just wanted to bring that out as open discussion, as a kind of a notice of something to be coming. Look for that. If you have questions or other ideas, let me know, or let them be heard.
Any questions for Councilor Jameson? All right. Any other items that we'd like to bring up under open discussion at this time? I do have one. I think everyone got a communication and a letter in their mailbox about platting fees. And I feel that will be something that will be coming up to the council in the near future. I know that we've had committees working on the inappropriate balance of the in the plating fees and our arterial road plan that we have, and that Mark Cotter's group have been trying to come up with ways to balance the imbalance that's in that program as it stands now. So I do encourage you all to please read the letter, and we'll have Mark Cotter come in the very near future and discuss over those things, either in land use, informational, so that we get that before a council meeting. Any other items for open discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to our presentations. Presentation number 1 will be election ordinance update, and our city clerk, Lori Hogstead, will be giving us a little update, I believe.
All right, Lori Hogstead, City Clerk, and I am preparing this and presenting this item to you along with Dave Fifley, City Attorney, is here as well and worked with me on this proposal. This is an amendment to Chapter 38 of our ordinances, which is entitled Elections. We have put together proposed amendments with first reading on tonight's meeting and second reading on the meeting of November 2nd. Just to review some of our city charter requirements as far as elections, and that is specified in our city charter, that they state the regular city election shall be held in even-numbered years on the second Tuesday of April. Conduct of the election shall be in accordance with provisions of state law, and we have highlighted that and underlined that for a specific reason. It also states candidates for public office shall run for office without party designation, and that the council may adopt ordinances for the conduct of elections and to prevent fraud. Of course, Sioux Falls, like many other cities in the state of South Dakota, follow the general election laws of the state. We follow Title 12, which is entitled Elections, and that applies specifically to municipal elections. And then there are some different requirements in SDCL Title 9, which is municipalities. There's some items here and there as well. I think Title 2 and Title 6 has a couple items as well, but those are the two that we most commonly refer to. The campaign finance requirements and reporting were amended per state law in 2007. They used to be part of Chapter 1225, and they were amended to become part of Chapter 1227. Right. A couple of the South Dakota statutes that we're referencing do say that city may by ordinance adopt the provisions of SDCL Chapter 1227, the campaign finance reporting requirements, to make the provisions of the chapter with or without amendments applicable to local elections. Also, there's a section that states that the city may adopt more stringent standards or requirements for our elections. Currently, City Ordinance Chapter 38 is mostly a verbatim adoption of Chapter 1227. There's a few variations. Actually, we have pared it from 40 sections down to 12. So there were 28 sections that were complete verbatim of what the state law said. Just as a reference, no other South Dakota municipalities have adopted verbatim the provisions of SDCL Chapter 1227. Other cities incorporate by reference in their charter and or their ordinances the general state law on elections, and those cities that City Attorney Fifley researched were Aberdeen, Pierre, Rapid City, and Watertown. Brookings has a few more. They've adopted portions of the chapter as needed for the elections. It's very short. And of course, we know that the city can adopt the provisions of Chapter 1227 without a verbatim adoption. The items that we follow specifically are, all the campaign finance reporting guidelines, and we do have the table of contribution limits. The proposal that we have does make one change whereby we will follow exactly what the state law says for contribution limits. And those that were changed now say unlimited on the screen, but there were several that were from candidate campaign committees, from political action committees, and from political parties to a person or a campaign committee where the limit was set at $5,000. If we're going to follow the state law on all of the other contributions, the $5,000 was just a number that was determined after some meetings back in 2007. But really, if we're going to follow the state law, we should have ours unlimited as well. And these second point, state statutes have presumption of constitutionality. That is comes from the city attorney, as well as campaign finance limits are an evolving legal landscape, and Dave can further speak on those if you wish. We do continue to commit to transparency of reporting by placement on our city's website. Whenever financial statements come in, they are reviewed, if not that day, the following day, and put on our website the following day. I have been working with our web development office to make those a little bit more readable, and just put a few more categories in there so they're a little bit easier to find. And so we're working on that. And also, this is something new. We, instead of recreating the state's forms and trying to come up with our own forms, we are just going to use the forms that are designed by the Secretary of State's office. They do a fantastic job of putting these together. I talked to Kia Warren, who's the Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, and she was more than pleased that we were going to be using the state's forms. That just makes sense. And a lot of candidates, honestly, will print out the state forms anyway and bring them to us. And this way it just eliminates us trying to recreate, and every time they make a change, to make changes to ours. They are undergoing some changes right now, and we'll have those to me the end of October or mid-November for the changes. And then I'm also working with our IT department to have those available online, so that they can be filled in online. And we won't have the nice submitting system, but we will have the ability to either email in the forms or to scan them in and send them in, and that will qualify because we can accept electronic reporting forms. So that will be a good step. Also, this was something that Dave and I talked about quite a bit, and we thought that this really was a great idea, that by separate ordinance that we would have the City Council adopt the municipal election handbook and the campaign finance reporting requirements prior to each regular municipal election. So this handbook would be adopted, and it would include all of the forms, the instructions, the requirements, the essential deadlines, which would all then have force of law if we adopted this handbook. And so I will be working on putting that handbook together. We have it, obviously, but making changes and amendments to it. With a couple of these changes, we just want to stress that whoops, I got behind there, sorry about that. The city would still maintain local control over municipal elections, and the city clerk's office would still conduct municipal elections. Our Board of Ethics would investigate and prosecute incumbent candidates, and the city attorney's office would investigate and prosecute non-incumbent candidates. So there would still be a great deal of city involvement. We're not taking that away. We're just simply trying to mainstream and simplify the process. Some of the sections that we added a new section, which is a preamble, and that's section 38001. And the preamble just states that the provisions of the general election laws of the state of South Dakota shall apply to all municipal elections unless specifically provided by city charter or ordinance. And the provisions of the campaign finance regulations applicable to state legislative office shall also apply to municipal positions. It goes further on to state that the city clerk shall conduct all municipal elections provided by this chapter and by the charter, and all forms would be submitted to our office. That our office or the city council by ordinance may adopt specific filing and campaign finance reporting requirements for any municipal election. In addition to those provided by state law, we do have a few different deadlines than what is stated in the law. And then also by ordinance, the city may call for an advisory election on any issue to be presented to the voters at any regularly or special election. There's a number of sections that we have not made any changes to, and I listed those. And you have a sheet that each of you has, and is also available over there, that shows the different changes. And then and I should back up and say, what we did with this, we're trying to figure out how to take 40 sections and reduce them down to 12. And in working with Dave Feifley's office, we determined the best way to do that would be to overstrike the entire section and then just start over with those sections that we're keeping, and we're underlining those. Because of the numbering, it was really hard to recreate the numbering, so we thought let's just be neat and clean about it, delete everything, overstrike everything, and just start new. So we'll have 12 new sections. But by doing that, everything that we've added has been underlined, but that doesn't mean everything's been changed, which is why I have that explanation sheet to explain exactly what has been changed. We do have a few sections that have minor amendments to them. One of those is section 38, our new 38006, persons and entities required to submit campaign finance disclosure statements. Basically, we have changed the word filed to submitted, or files, submits, filing, submitting, per some state law changes this past session. So just changing that. And then we are also incorporating in a couple of sections the very last financial statement that's due 60 days after the election or 60 days after a secondary election is considered the termination statement. So we just wanted to make that clear. And that's really the changes that we made in that section. In section 38, new 38007, investigation and prosecution of violations by the Board of Ethics, we did add in a phrase, right now it reads, the city attorney shall investigate violations of the provisions of this chapter by any persons not currently holding an elected office within the city and may prosecute any violation thereof. And we added, not otherwise subject to the jurisdiction of the South Dakota Attorney General or applicable state's attorney. And if you need further clarification on that, I'm sure Dave could further clarify. And then in the new section 38008, access to records by investigating authority, they talked about political committee. And unless you work in the election world, what you don't know is political committee really means candidate campaign committee, political action committee, ballot question committee, or political party. So I just thought it would be best if we could state those out instead of just calling it political committee, because I think sometimes people confuse that with a political action committee. And really that means really anyone running for office or any question that might be before the group of voters as well. All right, so those are our changes. Again, our first reading is set for tonight. We'll give a very abbreviated version tonight, and then we will have second reading scheduled for November 2nd. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and or City Attorney Feifley.
Councilor Offenbach?
Thank you, Lori. It's always good to stop repeating what's already written somewhere else. So good job, but just a couple of things to clarify. I'm looking at the ordinance itself, which in our packet is I'm looking at the back, so the second page, Part D, under Section 2. That final report shall be considered the termination statement. Does that then replace that report that's at the end of the year, or what does that mean?
No, there was a separate designation talking about a termination statement. And the termination statement is the 60 days following the election or following the secondary. Not the only persons that are required to continue to report are those that are elected to office, are still required to report at the end of each year, through December 31 of each year. This would be for those that are not elected, that would be their final and their termination statement, just so that it was set out in two separate sections and it made more sense to us to have it all in one place.
Okay.
So good question.
No, that makes sense to me. Then on slide number 6, looking at the campaign finance reporting requirements to follow state law, can you just tell us again what would be the difference from what it is now? I know that currently it's $1,000 per individual per calendar year.
Yes, per individual. There is a restriction. It's in the very first column. I could go back to that one. There was a limit. Whoops, there we are. In the very first column, it says from candidate campaign committee, and it now says unlimited. It had said $5,000. The one directly underneath that, from a political action committee to a person, had again said $5,000. That's now unlimited. And from a political party to a person is now unlimited. as well as from a political action committee and political party to a candidate campaign committee. Not everyone forms what they call a candidate campaign committee. They might just be running as an individual. And so those limits were set at 5,000, and we changed those to unlimited to comply with state law.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions from the council? Councilor Rolfing.
Lori, on your, it'd be what, about your fourth slide, the city ordinance, chapter 38, mostly verbatim, you took that out. Is that going to be not be influenced, is that going to change in any way our operations or policies of the council? I'm just a little concerned that maybe that would have something in there that we would need to keep for one reason or another. Just a thought as I was going through that. I believe
so. I'm going to look at Dave.
Councilor Rolfing, to answer your question, you'll notice the preamble says that the council is reserving to itself the authority to adopt additional ordinances regarding anything regarding elections. A lot of other charter communities or home rule communities around the state have done this very thing where they adopt by reference essentially the state statutes, but reserve to themselves the ability to adopt more stringent. So my answer would be it would not affect your operations whatsoever. The sections that we have kept in ordinance that we're recommending to you are such that the ones that are unique to Sioux Falls we are keeping.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, thank you, Lori.
Yep, thank you.
Next on the agenda will be Summer Youth Transit Pilot Program Report by our legislative operative, Jim David, budget analyst, David Bixler, and Sam Treblecock.
Good afternoon again. The Free Youth Transit Program, known as the Dog Days of Summer, was created and authorized following a special meeting of the City Council on May 26, 2015. The program was approved unanimously by the Council and provided youth an opportunity to ride transit at no charge until September 7th, or the beginning of the Sioux Falls School District year. Once the resolution became effective in June, City Planning administered the program with Sioux Area Metro. I should also point out that the Sioux Falls School District was instrumental in getting the word out to students and families early on, even though this was late coming. The program, as envisioned in the resolution, was fairly simple. Any person interested in riding for free was required to apply for a free dog tag. Children between 6 and 10 were required to be accompanied by adults, and those 5 years and younger did not require a dog tag. I'm going to turn this over to Sam. He's going to just detail some of the administration and also the ridership and some of the lessons learned.
Thanks, Jim. Sam Treblecock, City Planning. Mainly, I'm just going to take you through some numbers. I think that's a lot of what you're wondering about. Also, just some information about generally how the program went, what we might think about trying to do a little differently next year, if you'd like to move forward with it again next year. So to start off with the dog tag passes that we provided, this kind of gives you an idea in 2015 what we did. 358 free dog tags were provided because they were free during that 2015 year. In comparison to 2014, again, those were, and all the way through 2011, the passes then were $25. So 188 were in 2014, 2013, 225, 212 in 2012, and 70 in 2011. You can see there's a little bit, we provided, I think it was half the price if they went through half the summer at that time. So that's what that half summer means there. We did refund 13 of them for people that did purchase them. They did ask, 13 did ask for refunds. But obviously significant numbers of more children did take advantage of it now that they were free. The rides by the year, in 2015 we had 10,300, 2014 9,800, 2013 91, and then 2012 5,500. So we've had increases every year. Certainly in 2015 we saw a higher number of rides overall, even though the program did start later. But we did break that down a little bit too, between 14 and 15, because each year is different. I did want to make sure that you understood how that looked by the month. 2014 versus 2015. We actually had more rides in 2014 in May and June in 2014, but in 2015 we had more rides, of course, in August and a little bit in September. Some of that can be attributed just to how the school year was longer. It was a 16-month school year, or summer year, summer vacation, versus 13 weeks in 2014. So if you look at it just in terms of the rides per week, we actually had 755 rides per week in 2014 versus 2015. I don't know exactly. A lot, I think, because you can see in June we had a lot of rides. A lot of the riders in 2014 were probably the rides going to the immersion program. That's where a lot of the rides were coming from. I'm not sure why those rides were less in June, even before we really started and got the program up and going. So that's, I think, where we saw a lot of the startup rides were less in 2015 there early on. But just to kind of take you through what we generally saw, we talked about this a little bit staff-wise during our staff meetings at Sioux Area Metro. What worked well and what could be improved. Certainly would take your guys' input too. What has worked well. Many more passes were distributed in 2015 than 2014. We saw a lot of passes, a lot more people that were utilizing it. The coverage by the media provided really great publicity for Sioux Area Metro in general, that getting information out there that, hey, we do have a bus system and kids can use it, and other people can use it too. It's great information to get out to the public. We had no issues at all with the conduct of kids. Hearing from the drivers, they thought it worked really well. Also, there was no issue about abusing the free passes in any ways, where the kids were using them to just get rides and just hang out. So that was really good. What could be improved? Rides per week were down, indicating that free passes that were used weren't used necessarily that frequently. But we do think people were trying it. So how can we get people to use it more frequently for their different trips? We could certainly work with the school district earlier on marketing, and a lot of that was just in the way we started the program later, and I think that would be something that would be very helpful. Before the school year would end, we would work with the school districts to get the word out about the bus pass. Dog tags are available. Allow school passes to be used as free passes instead of actually handing out dog tags. If we're going to do them as free passes, we think that's something to consider, is to just use the school IDs. The ones for the previous year would be their pass on to the bus. Be a lot easier, more convenient for them. We've been doing it with Augustana College. They use their school passes to get on. Augustana is in a contract with us to get unlimited rides. So we think that would work well with the schools too, the high schools and the middle schools. Develop a school travel training program, something to get people to understand, for kids to learn how to ride the bus program, the buses. And that's something we'd be very interested in doing. Find ways to maintain school ridership during the school year. We need to find ways not to just do it during the summer, but also during the school year, especially as it becomes more difficult for us to maintain a sustainable system. We got to figure out how to maintain that. So I think that concludes what we had. So I would certainly take any questions that you have.
Okay. Question from the council. Councilor Erickson.
I don't have any questions, but I think what worked well, the no issues of conduct of kids, no issues with kids abusing the free pass, that's awesome. We should be celebrating that, that it was looked at as an asset. It was looked at being a favorable thing and not abused with joy rides, et cetera. And I just think that's something that we should be celebrating because, you know, they certainly didn't take it for granted this year anyways, and that it was something that was looked upon favorably for them to get to the libraries, a job, school, their friends, whatever it is. It allowed them to move about the community. Also, the media coverage, I think, is a great thing to focus on as well, and hopes that maybe if we need to come out with other marketing tools or different things to be able to increase that ridership. You know, what can we do to include groups to learn how to ride? One of the things that I did this summer was talked about it at a summer school, and a lot of the kids were really excited because many of them were juniors and seniors in hopes of going to the big city to go to college. And so for them, it was exciting for them to be able to ride it around town to learn the bus system. So if they go to Chicago or Minneapolis or a much larger community, they kind of felt like they knew a little bit of what they were doing, and so it gave them that leg up to be able to feel safe in riding in the community. So thanks for the presentation. I think that this is definitely a positive.
Councilor Kiley.
Thank you. First of all, Sam, I'd like to thank you for your efforts in implementing this because we were, as a council, slow out of the starting blocks with this program this past summer, and that put pressure on you and your staff. And I think you did a great job in implementing it kind of under the gun. So thank you very much. And I, too, am pleased with the results. And unfortunately, due to our slow start this past year, 2015, you know, it'll really take another year, 2016. And I obviously would encourage, as I did at the start of this program, that we look at extending that into next year. And then continuing to work on improving it. And 4 out of the 5 bullets on what can be improved all involve the school district. So obviously we need to have a good partnership with the school district and in helping to make that happen. I would volunteer to assist you in any way with the district if you see that's appropriate.
Thank you.
Councilor Karski.
Thank you. I'm going to follow that same train of thought as Councilor Kiley on what can be improved. I love it. I'm just wondering, are you looking for permission to do it? Do you have the resources to do this? What is the plan?
Well, we certainly would have the resources to do it. The buses are available, and you know, that's something if council is seeing the benefits of it, we would certainly see the benefits of moving forward again and trying it and trying to improve it, especially trying to improve ridership and trying to get, you know, kids to ride the bus that might be willing to ride the bus into the future. I think that's a good thing.
So you do have the resources to implement this then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, what we're really just missing is the $25 fare. That's the only thing. I mean, we're not looking at as part of this package yet to increase routes or anything else or times of day that we're doing it. We're just using our existing capacity in our buses for the rides. Certainly you are missing a piece of revenue. That's something we have to be cognizant of and think about, but it's not significant enough where it's going to impact us, that one piece.
Okay, well then let me turn to my council members and ask, you know, where would we like to continue this discussion?
Oh, Councilor Rolfing.
I won't go there quite yet. I wanted to comment more on the program. Using school passes next year, will that or will that not allow some individuals over 18 the capacity to use it for free? It should, because some of those seniors would be 18 plus, but not a big deal, obviously.
Right. I guess we'd look at it that anyone that was a high school senior could use it.
Yeah. Okay.
for that year.
And I would agree with that. That's not a big deal, and again, if we can get them to use a bus, it's probably a better thing too. The travel training program, I would encourage you to work with Jean on that out at CCOG. That was some money that we spent to get her, and that would be a good thing for her to be part of. And then to comment on your situation with continuing it, I don't think there's any question. I think we want to continue it, and we should just, I don't think we need to vote or anything. I think they've got the thing going, and maybe we do have to vote to do it. Well, maybe we do.
We did it for 1 year.
Councilor Jameson is going like this, and he's usually really smart on this kind of thing. Usually, I said. And so we will probably have to do something like that, but I would surely be in favor of it.
Councilor Uffenbach?
I don't disagree. I like what I see, but I really see it just being such baby steps yet. I'm really concerned and really curious about why we gave them the free pass and people used it less than they used it previously. That's really interesting to me, that I would use something more if I paid $25 for it than I would use it if it were given to me. So I think it's something to think about, and I'd like to see one more year numbers. I would not vote to set it up as we're going to do it forever and ever, amen. I'd vote for one more year to see how it goes, if that was something that council wanted to try.
Councilor Jameson?
Thank you. If I could, you're right. One of the big questions from the beginning was whether the individuals would hold it as a value if they were getting it for free, and that does need to be worked out a little bit better to make sure that they haven't considered it or they truly have considered the cost that it takes to run the system. The only other piece I would add, if any good marketing plan, you would try to do a little bit of a focus group to determine how it was going, how they saw it, how the students saw it. And I think Councilor Kiley was hitting on it. It was partnering with the school district in some way to interface with some of the kids who used the system and ask them what it was that worked, what didn't work, how we could get more kids to do it, what are their thoughts about it, and interface with them, I think, in a way that probably has never been done. Maybe, I don't know if it has, but I know that talking to at least one board member of the school district, Sioux Falls district, that they were very excited to interface with the city council on this program going forward for the next round. And I think Sam's heard it from them that I think there's a lot of energy here that we can tap into. And I think just a little bit of work prior to us voting on doing it again is just good due diligence. After providing the service, we really should communicate with some people who wrote it, the school system, and get their feedback, work through a committee or work through some of those board members to make sure we do it right the next time and learn from it, I guess.
Councilor Uffenbach?
Just one more question then. If you can ride the bus next year with just your school pass, how do we keep track of who is using it? If we don't, I mean, because the way we did it this year, you had to sign up to get the free pass, right?
Right. It is a good question. I mean, how do we know exactly who is using it? I mean, ridership we can keep track at the fare box. But, yeah, you wouldn't be able to keep track of how many passes are out there. You'd just be keeping track of ridership.
Well, this year, because we had to sign up to get the free pass, we have the list of names of people that used it, and we can really talk to them and say, hey, why did you use it, or why didn't you use it? And then the year after, if we do it this way, we aren't going to have that really great data to mine. So I just wonder, just a question, if we might want to do it differently.
Councilor Kiley?
Regarding the free passes not being used as frequently, I think it's important that we also keep in mind that we nearly doubled the number of free passes from one year to the next. So I guess to me it's not surprising that may drop some. It'd be great if that would hold throughout with all of the additional riders that we picked up. But in 2014, with 188 full summer passes, and I think, Sam, you'd mentioned $25 per pass was collected at that time. Correct. That's amounts to $4,700. And so even in 2015, we almost doubled that. If we had been collecting $25 a pass, we're still looking at $89.50, which in terms of our city budget is a pretty low amount of money for what I think is encouraging lifelong ridership in the mass transit system. Because as a city, and I've said this before, as the city continues to grow, I think we're going to find mass transit that much more important as we progress into the future. And we need to start now with this generation moving forward. And I think it's a great program, and I think it's very worthwhile to continue for at least another year, if not two, quite frankly.
Councilor Staggers?
Yes, Sam, part of the money that we got for this program came from Augustana.
No, part of this program didn't come from Augustana. I maybe didn't make that clear. Augustana is a totally separate program itself. Oh. And they have a pass program. They provide a certain dollar figure based upon semesters before ridership. And the students and staff then can ride for free, even though the Augustana is paying for it for each semester.
You know how much how much money they put up so that the students could ride free, or?
Basically, it's 85 cents per ride for the semester before. I don't remember if remember the amount, Eric, about what it was. Yeah, I think it was in $1,000 in that range for each semester.
For each semester.
Yeah, it's in that range. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And it does vary based on the ridership.
Okay. Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. And Rick pretty much said what I needed to say with the numbers. And I think just kind of piggybacking off of that, with all the extra media attention and coverage that we got on getting the word out, and with partnering with the school district, that was out that much more as well. So if we're talking about $8,900, you couldn't buy that amount of coverage and publicity we got in order to do this program. And so I think that's, a huge benefit as well. And with partnering with the school program, they acted so quick. And I know Jim and I had talked about it, and they had the message conducted between them and Jim, and it went very, very fast. And it was nice. I got it on my phone. I got an email, I got a phone call, and I got a text. And so it was great, the amount of information. It was the same message, obviously, but it was the amount of information to be able to get was substantial. And I'd also piggyback off of making sure that we do the pass for at least one more year, unless it's something we want to have year-round and go year-round. But if we do the pilot, I think that we need to pull those numbers so we can ask them, what do you like? Why didn't you ride more? Were you scared? Were you just didn't do it? What was the point? Where did you go? What are the reasons for this? I think that's just good statistical information to have. So I think that we need to do that at least one more year as well. So thank you.
Councilor Karski.
Thank you. Sam, at the same time that we did the dog tags for the kids, we did one for veterans too, where the veterans, I believe, were able to ride free. And I think that was for the same time frame. Is that correct?
We did that as part of the fare update ordinance, which was in that same time frame, yes, this summer. And part of that was to allow veterans to ride for free. Since that time, that has become free. The first month that it was free, we had 1,100 rides by veterans in 1 month. So certainly they were making use of that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's great.
Councilor Offenbach.
I may be belaboring these numbers a little bit, but I really do think we need to, I love the 1,100, that's great. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit, but my point with the numbers on doing this one more time is that, yes, we gave out almost double the number that we sold last year for free passes, but we only had 523 more rides, a very small percentage. And actually, if you do the math, for the 188 people that bought $25 passes last year, they, on average, rode the bus 52 times with that pass. The people who got it for free this year, on average, only rode it 28 times. And so that, to me, says a whole bunch of people used it a lot, and there's a whole bunch of people that used it one time and went, not for me. And those are the people I really think, and Christine said it, that those are the people we really need to talk to. Why did they say, not for me? I don't want to do this. It didn't work for me for whatever reason. Those are the people I'd really like to hear from. Because we know we have to change how the system works. This would be one more way that we can kind of get some information to help us make those decisions in the right way in the coming years. So I think it's great, but I really want another pilot.
Any other comments? Councilor Jameson.
I just remember reviewing what Sioux City had done, and their numbers started off kind of slow, and then they just ballooned. So I would encourage you to continue it as well. On the veterans ridership, that actually implemented just a little bit later than the dog tags, but recently we had the discussion about adding an amendment to include veterans with the pool passes as a discounted rate. And my thoughts then were, for the bus, was that the transportation is almost imperative to holding a job, to living in our society, but a pool pass is not. And but a discount is a courtesy discount is fine, but a bus pass was imperative to the individuals that I talked to regarding, the service. So I'm just excited too to hear about those numbers as well, Sam. I'd forgotten, and I'm glad that came up.
Okay, any other comments, questions? I'd just like to add to it also. This is a program that, we sent out some mixed signals at the beginning of it, and then we got started late. I do want to thank the school system for, getting the word out as soon as they could, but I feel very strongly that if we do this more like in March or something, that last quarter, that I think we'll get a lot larger response. I had several mothers come up to me and say thank you because their child had gotten a bus pass and they were able to have that freedom of moving around the city without driving or having to call mom or dad to come and pick them up. And that gave the parents the freedom to probably stay at work first, but just that freedom, and also it's teaching the children how to use the system, and I hope in the future that will pick up our main ridership as these kids grow into adults and look at other alternative ways of transportation. Last weekend I spent time with family up in the cities and got to take a look at the St. Paul's newest light rail system that they did on University Boulevard. Not saying that a light rail is for Sioux Falls or not, but it was very interesting. It was the first time I had gotten to see it in an area that I frequent a lot because of my family living there, and the way they designed it on this street. It was an existing street, and they placed it right in the middle of the street. And the way it interacts with traffic, walking traffic, biking traffic, and vehicle traffic, I thought was extremely interesting. And if you're in the cities, I encourage you to go over and take a look at it, because it looks like it just belongs there. But once again, going back to this, Sam, thank you. Our transit management, we put you guys, put your feet to the fire on this one also. Thank you for the work that you've done, and hopefully in the future we can make things better on this. So, okay. Anything else, Council? Okay, we'll move on here to Internal Audit Report number 15-04 for transit. And Rich Oskell will be our presenter.
Just a coincidence that happened. So. Before I get started, I'd like to introduce our newest member of our internal audit team. I'll just have Ashley come over here, and it's her first day on the job. Some of you already met her. So this is Ashley Stroshine, and we're excited to have her on the team. So
welcome to the staff.
Thank you.
Any questions since we got her here? Okay, there we go.
We're not going to put you on the spot.
Thank you.
First of all, this was a special request. It was approved by the audit committee, I think, back in February. It wasn't on the regular plan, but we put it in there. One thing, though, that struck me, I did this audit personally, that I didn't realize how many people rode transit. It's certainly not the majority by any means, but I had not ridden transit personally probably in 20 years. And I rode every single fixed route at least once. Some of them I rode several times. One route I got on down at the bus stop downtown, and it was the middle of the afternoon, and there was probably 16 people on the bus besides me and the driver. And I commented to the guy next to me. He said, "Oh, sometimes I've been on this route, and it's standing room." At no time during those routes that I personally rode was there less than maybe 2 riders besides me and the driver. Sometimes there'd be 12 or 15. I'd say the average is probably 4 to 5. And the statistics that are in the report, there's about 1 million rides that are given on fixed route every year. Jim, would you show those 2 pictures, those 2 photos? It's really hard to tell how many people are on the bus. Some of the buses are wrapped, and a lot of them have the smoke glass. It's really hard to tell how many people are on there. There's another photograph of the wrapped bus. Yeah, certainly not the majority, but a significant number are wrapped with that advertising, so you just can't tell how many people are on the bus. So people do ride the bus. Because of the time limitations, we'll go right to the audit objectives. That's on bottom of page 3 there. The objectives of the audit were to review, number 1, the internal controls over financial information and financial operations, and number 2 was determine if the bus service, both the fixed route and the paratransit, was effective and scheduled efficiently. And let's go to the back of the report, Jim, on way to the back there on page 14. Well, we'll just go, in the interest of time, I'll get right to the conclusion and then we'll get to the audit recommendations, because if you're on the audit committee, which is 4 out of the 8 members, we've gone in quite a bit of detail on this report already. So the conclusion we came to is that Sioux Area Metro provides safe and courteous and on-time service to the riders at a modest cost. When we looked at the performance measures compared to the peer agencies, Sioux Falls compared very favorably. However, more resources need to be shifted from paratransit to fixed route. Fixed route can absorb a lot more riders, and management wanted me to make that point, that they can just absorb a lot more riders at very little cost. Other resources need to be explored so that the nonprofit agencies can provide their own agency trips rather than relying upon paratransit. And if we get more resources over to the fixed route, we can offer say, for example, service on Sunday or just longer hours. And that in turn would be easier to market to people, because right now you're competing against people that, say, can have an automobile, and it's very hard to compete against that when you have a indirect hourly service where you might have to ride the bus for 30 minutes, whereas if you're in your car, you would be at your job in 15 minutes. So that's hard to compete with. But if you had more frequent service, if you had longer hours, if you had Sunday service, that would be a lot easier to market to people that have a choice. Because right now, most of the people that ride the fixed route don't necessarily have a choice. That's their only means of transportation. We did talk quite a bit with management about the alternate fuels, for example, compressed natural gas, and quite a bit of discussion on the hybrid diesel electric buses. Right now, before that would be recommended, there'd have to be a lot more study about the payback period, because right now there'd be significant capital costs, and the federal government is not willing to provide as much help with buying new buses. The new buses are very expensive. There's just the problem of people to maintain the buses. You'd have that transition period where you'd have to have some of your mechanics that could work on the diesel buses and some that could work on the hybrids. So there's a lot of things that you have to consider before you do that. And as far as the emissions, at one time the diesel electric hybrids were cleaner than the diesel buses. but those were in comparison to diesel buses from 12 to 14 years ago. The new diesel buses are much, much cleaner, so the difference between the hybrids and the conventional diesel is not very dramatic. And so that would be something to consider too. So we didn't make any recommendation on that, but certainly in the future that'll be become more and more of an issue. Let's get to the recommendations on page 13, I believe there, Jim. So made 3 recommendations on this audit report. One was to raise the paratransit from $2 to $2.50, and all fares should be reviewed regularly and adjusted for inflation, and management agreed with that. That will take council action, as you know. Number 2, we recommended that transit management purchase and implement different paratransit scheduling software and also utilize GPS technology on the paratransit buses if they have the budget to do so. Go to the next page there. And management agreed with that, and they are starting trials this month in October with this software called Paraplan. And the third recommendation we had was that we need to have the new updated 5-year development plan. The last plan was 2011 to 2015, so a new one is necessary. And management agreed with that. Hopefully a year from now, October 2016, they'll have a new 5-year development plan. So if there's any questions, I'm here. We have the management team from Sioux Area Metro here. We'd be happy to entertain your questions.
Question from the council. Councilor Rolfing.
I don't know, I have a question, but some comments. First of all, thank you, Rich, for doing such a complete and thorough audit. It was something that I wanted done for a couple of reasons, and as I pretty well thought, everything came out very, very well, and with some additions to what they're doing now, we should keep going. The 5-year plan, I encourage you guys to go ahead and get that done. You know that's an important thing. You can't know where you're going unless you've got some plans to go ahead. So yeah, let's get that rolling, and that might be a good time to bring in some of those people we talked about with the on this, what was we were just talking about with the bringing in some or the passes to do a focus group. That kind of thing might be a good thing to do. But again, following the transit task force that we program that we looked at and that we've developed. So just a couple of comments, and let's see, was there one? The fee increase. I'm sure that's something you'll want us to consider. I think it's something that we will consider probably later this year, and we'll see what happens with that. Thank you.
Councilor Erickson.
Question about the number 2 recommendation, the transit management should purchase and implement different paratransit scheduling software. I know the implementation was in October. Do you, and maybe I should probably know this, but do you provide additional follow-up after the recommendations have been implemented as far as how it's going with the new software? I know that they talked about in that recommendation that an RFP would be done to update that software, but I'm just curious about that specific recommendation.
How much of a follow-up do we do?
Yeah.
Usually we just have management typically self-report on a typical recommendation. Did you do this? And in some cases it's easy to verify, but yeah, we do follow up with management. Do we do a full-blown audit? Normally not. Usually we wait until the next time that we do an audit in that area, and then we kind of, okay, what did we recommend? Did you really do that, what you said that you accomplished? Were you looking for something specific on that one?
For this particular one, this with the potential cost savings with this, it should almost pay for the software update itself, with having multiple paratransit buses show up at the same location, or maybe not have a destination in mind for some of them. I know that certainly has been a complaint I have received in regards to that area, and so I'm just kind of curious how that.
Well, I did observe the dispatching process. I spent quite a bit of time talking to management and then observing what the dispatchers do, and it's a very complicated process. We downloaded all the daily reports into Excel spreadsheets, and we did filtering and sorting, looking for those occasions where, two buses show up at the same location at the same time, and kind of identified those using the Excel spreadsheets. What we're finding is, two buses will show up in one location about the same time. That's not unusual, but typically somebody's going to the south part of town, somebody's going to the east side, they're going to completely different locations. So, we could make it very more efficient if you kept the paratransit buses as full as possible, as often as possible, but that would mean some people would have to be on there for an hour or longer, to do that. So that's definitely a consideration. When I talked to dispatchers, they said, the scheduling software, it's a little, it could be a little more user-friendly, the one that they were currently using. So that's why we recommended that you consider an alternative. And at one time, they did have the GPS technology, so the dispatcher could see on the screen exactly where all the buses were all the time. And right now, because of budget reasons, they had to get rid of that technology. It was rather expensive, or at the time it was considered beyond their budget. But it does offer you some efficiency from a dispatching perspective when you can see exactly where everybody is in real time. And if you have a change in, say, a doctor's appointment, somebody got done early, hey, is there a bus in the area? Maybe that can go pick up so-and-so.
Right.
Maybe they're scheduled at 10 o'clock for pickup, they're done at 9 o'clock. Okay, maybe somebody is in the neighborhood, maybe you can swing by. And that's easy to see on the GPS. Because right now, the dispatcher has to go out on the radio, says, any units near, can somebody pick up somebody at Avera? If nobody responds, then she doesn't necessarily know exactly where they're at. But with GPS, you can easily see, oh, there's a bus right here. Hey, can Joe just swing by there, even though it's not on his schedule?
Because generally, the trips for paratransit are just single trips. Is that the case usually? They're not multiple trips, so you may only have one person on the paratransit at a time, or is there
the ones I wrote, and I didn't write on as many as I did the fixed route, but there would often be 2 or 3 people on there.
Okay.
But it's kind of a customer service issue. You don't want to have people on there for 45 minutes.
No, I understand that. Yeah,
so,
I just was.
But yeah, they try, when they're scheduling people, they try to be conscious of, okay, you can pick somebody up in this neighborhood. You're close to here. You can, but I would say there's usually more than one person on the paratransit, the ones that I rode personally. But yeah, there are some single trips, obviously. It's just the way it works.
Right.
One complaint there was, though, that the buses tend to be rather stiff when they go over, say, railroad tracks. They're really truck-like. They're not car-like. That was a complaint. But there aren't a whole lot of options on paratransit when you buy a bus like that. There's only a couple places you have to buy from, and they do tend to rock and roll a lot, even though the drivers try to really slow down at the railroad tracks. That is one complaint that is consistent on paratransit. So,
Councilor Jamison.
I've got some questions, maybe in comments with Sam, but if you want to maybe have more questions with Rich.
Just to follow up to that last question, it might be more for Sam. On the paratransit buses, is there a difference between a paratransit bus and a school bus that's accessorized with a wheelchair lift? I mean, are they the same thing, or are we talking 2 different things? Can you help me out on that?
The fixed routes that they use now can take wheelchairs, and they have 2 spots for wheelchairs, and they have a lift. Okay. And they are, when I rode the fixed route, it was not uncommon to see wheelchair passengers come on board. But I can't speak to the school buses.
Could we have one of transit staff come up?
Maybe Eric can address that better than I can. So.
Eric Meyerson with the Sioux Area Metro. Our paratransit vehicles are similar to school buses, although the paratransit vehicles are like essentially on a truck chassis that they add a passenger compartment, but the lift and the wheelchair tie downs would be very similar to the same kind that would be used on a school bus.
Would there be a difference in cost or ride, or, I mean, is it something that was looked at as an option?
It's probably the school buses are more tailored for larger capacity.
No, I'm talking
Yeah, I
not
mean,
a regular
it's
size
theoretically
school bus.
possible,
Yeah.
but they're both pretty much tailored for the specific use.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can comment on that too, Councilor Karski, I want to say the difference is definitely the size, the length of the bus. The paratransit buses are asked to go into areas that I would not want to try to drive a regular school bus into, residential, and even some of our medical business areas would be quite difficult to get something like that in. And then the interior of the bus itself is structured for people with like wheelchairs and that, so that there's going to be less numbers that are going to be able to get there. Your ambulatory people are allowed to use, I think we still have the fold-down seats and everything. So my experience with the paratransit is that in the mornings and that and afternoons, you're going to see some full buses due to some of the organizations that we serve. And then during the day, it's really hard to put multiple people on it due to the fact that they're all going in different directions, different times, things like that. And that's what part of this software does. And then the dispatcher working with the drivers as they are out there, they do ask out and see if there's a driver in an area or something to pick up somebody if they are new.
Yeah, that happens all the time because things don't always go according to schedule.
What brought it to my mind is I saw a school bus that was from a small town. It wasn't a regular length huge school bus. It was a much shorter version, but it did have a wheelchair lift in it, and I didn't know if that was a possibility or if that was an option for our paratransit.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Rich.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Councilman Jameson. Excuse me, Rich, don't take off yet.
More so for Sam, if I could, a couple things on the, I just wanted to share that Mike Cooper, Sam, Eric, Dave Bixler, and myself have met regarding some of the efficiencies of the transit system, and really just having a open conversation about making the system more convenient for riders. And we're reviewing a lot of things, which routes are the heavy routes, and trying to make it a friendly system, a friendlier system. And we've got a lot of ideas we're floating around, so we're working on some ideas, and just wanted to share that it's kind of real preliminary, but we are just trying to think out of the box a little bit. The other big topic here, though, is raising the rates. And we had the item in front of us not that long ago, and I think this audit has maybe enlightened a couple other counselors, and now I think we probably should move ahead. But what is the sequence? I know you guys don't want to bring it. You did that once, and now it's up to us to do it if we want to do it. But what is the timeline? Where else would it need to go before we vote it?
You would have to first start with Public Transit Advisory Board would be the first step. So they would provide a recommendation, and then it would come back to council after that recommendation. That's the general process. There's some public hearing notices that need to be included, but certainly I would
much time would that take?
Through this whole process is a couple months, making sure you get the right amount of public.
Well, I only bring it up as, nobody wants to do it. We had them here, we had this discussion before, and it was heavy and hard, and I understand, but somebody's going to have to probably initiate this and bring it back together. And, I just want to make sure that council knows that we need to do it. I think we've come around now, and we need to do it. So maybe with council leadership, we can organize that effort as a solid council movement, and not just one or two council members trying to push for it.
One other thing I'd point out, which you mentioned also, Councilor Jamison, on some of the suggestions you have for improvements. Those are the types of things that we'd ask from council, as we would update the transit development plan. That's what that would be about, is looking at doing just that. What kind of changes can we make to the system, routes, services that make it improve ridership and improve services available? So,
Councilor Rolfing.
A question for Rich, if you could. Rich, you recommended a jump from $2 to $2.50. What's your reasoning on that?
Well, frankly, we did try to raise it to $3, and that didn't work. So, but we need to raise it, and we need to do it regularly. Not every. It was 1996, I think, was the last rate increase. So it's been, I think, 19 years since they had been raised, and and then I also, when I looked at the other agencies, and it's in the report, I list them, what each those cities are charging. I think on page, well, it's in the report. I think on page 7 there, you should have a hard copy there. Everybody else was charging on their paratransit, for example, they were charging anywhere from $2.50 to $4 for the similar size agencies like Duluth and Fargo and other agencies, and we were way low, definitely. Not that we have to, just because Fargo charges $3, we have to charge $3, but it just wasn't keeping up with inflationary costs. So I thought that was a good step, and it would seem to be palatable to most of the riders. To have a minor increase from $2 to $2.50 wouldn't be a big shocking increase. And then if we could do it, on a regular basis every 2 to 3 years, going through the PTAB process of trying to keep up with inflationary costs, rather than waiting 2 decades to change it. And then when you do have to change it, it's very, very painful for everybody involved in the process. So,
any other questions? Just taking a look at something, I figure, Eric, could I have you come back up again? I don't know if you'll have these numbers, but I'm figuring right now, with paratransit, we're doing about 500 plus rides a day. Is that somewhere in that area?
Under 500 a day, yes.
That's amazing. That is just amazing. And I think a month or so ago, I had said something that I had been against any raises, but after hearing from some of our riders and that, some that I used to transport, I would be accepting to the 50-cent raise. So with that being said, Sam, this might be the next step. Since we've already gotten a recommendation from the PTAB committee, and we had turned that recommendation down, do we have to go back through that process? Or can it just be brought back to the council?
It would have to go back to PTAB as part of the process. So just like you would take a rezoning back to Planning Commission, you would have to take a fair increase back to PTAB for a recommendation, just as a part of the process.
Well, I would be in favor of having that discussion with Councilor Rolfing so that we can move forward on that. Any other questions, comments from the council? All right, thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
All right, our last presentation is an update on Minnesota Clerks and Finance Officers Association Advance Academy by Tamara Jorgensen.
Good afternoon. I'm Tamara Jorgensen. I'm an assistant city clerk and a master municipal clerk. Thank you, Council, for providing me with the opportunity to update you on my recent training seminars. I understand with the Land Use Committee meeting coming up, you have some big items, and you also have some big items on the council meeting tonight. So as a professional courtesy, I'm going to ask you, I can do this presentation in 10 minutes or I can do it in about 4. What would be your preference?
I think the
Six, yeah.
Six? Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I'd like to thank Jim David for assisting me with the slides, and I will move rapidly so you can get on to bigger and better things. In September of this year, I attended the 2015 Municipal Clerks Advanced Academy that was held at the Sanford Center in Bemidji, Minnesota. The classes were sponsored by the Minnesota Clerks and Finance Officers Association and the Center for Continuing Studies at St. Cloud State University. As you know, South Dakota does not have an organized clerical and financial officers association, so your generosity has allowed Denise and I to attend these sessions in Minnesota, so I thank you for that. The learning objective this year was called Project Management in Public Administration, and it consisted of 2 separate seminars. The first 6-hour session focused on project management, and the second session focused on managing resources effectively, which specifically focused on communication styles. The first seminar covered the basics of project management, including how to create a project plan, track the progress, and how to close out a project. The group was divided into 2 sections, and each section was asked to choose a topic that all municipal clerks can identify with. One half of the room chose records management as their topic, and the other half chose elections. And I was on the side of the room that had elections. Our project plans had to ensure the following stipulations were met: ensure all legal requirements are met, eliminate reinventing the wheel by standardizing routine project work, reduce the number of tasks that could be overlooked during the project, eliminate the duplication of effort, and ensure that all projects are in control and maximize uses of resources. Throughout the course of the project management training, the individuals were asked to cite examples of how their hometown or city handles the election process. There were many similarities noted, including the need to follow state law, municipal law, charters, and city ordinances. Another similarity was the concern that municipalities are using the same election workers each time. We are relying on an aging population for election assistance. This concern, particularly in the smaller communities, is how to recruit and retain new election workers. So that was a portion of our discussion. Also during this session, I discovered that our office procedures for handling elections are, and have been for some time, ahead of the curve on project management. Our office continues to have written procedures and policies in place regarding just about every step of elections. We have assigned tasks and deadlines that are clear and precise and easily monitored. Timelines are noted by month for specific election-related deliverables. And while some of our cities in Minnesota are still working on their websites, we have, or we will have, forms and directions available on the website should candidates need to access information outside of the standard 8 to 5 Monday through Friday hours. Some of the Minnesota cities handle their elections in one office by themselves. Our elections have been a consistent, successful collaboration between the City of Sioux Falls, Minnehaha and Lincoln County, and the state of South Dakota, along with the school district. One last thing that I noticed regarding elections is that the municipalities approach elections through a team standpoint. Many administrators indicated that the election workloads are fairly and evenly distributed amongst the staff, and they could not have a successful election without this teamwork. I'm happy to say that our office is again ahead of the curve in regards to this as well. The second part of the seminar focused on successful communication with team members. The presenter was demonstrating how to recognize certain personality characteristics. She emphasized that recognizing how a person receives information can determine how a person will act or react, and having basic knowledge in the onset of a conversation can give you a heads up on how to change your method of communication. So on the overhead, what is the first thing you notice? Anybody? Okay. To start out, she told us that it is not in human nature to acknowledge success. She stated that it is human nature to notice what is wrong first. So you see there's 2 items up there that are right and one that's wrong, and you notice the wrong one. She said this is normal and natural. She said, civility has diminished in our society and it's continuing to move downward. The media focuses more on bad things versus good, and bad events get more press than good events. The point is that this is normal and natural, but we have to somehow, as a society, we need to notice the positive items first. She talked about mapping people for communication by learning how people respond. There's different styles of sensory perception. There's, of course, 5 senses. We focused on 3 of them: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Visual people, 70% of people are in this category. They're quick-minded, they're thinkers. They sometimes finish other people's sentences. They like order and structure. And visual people will notice body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice in other people faster than the other 2. The second one is auditory. The social skills for that person are not as refined. They do not like eye contact. They have a lot of internal self-talk. You need time when you're dealing with an auditory person. You have to give yourself extra time to break through the process and give them time to understand what you're asking. She used the example as computer experts, math techs, and people that are very analytical. The last one is kinesthetic. Those people are more inclined to dress comfortably. They observe other people's feelings quicker than others. They're used as a sounding board. And they like to use their hands when they're communicating, or they use a little more body language and facial expression. The goal of a good manager is to have a little of all these qualities. Trigger words for a conversation: if you're dealing with a visual person, you want to use words that use the word see or sight. It's like, do you see what I'm saying? For an auditory person, you'll say, do you hear the differences? And for the feeling person, you would say, how do you feel about that? The last part of that training dealt with communication suggestions for improving your team. She gave an example of having all of the team members in a room sitting in a circle. It's called a talking circle. She said that not talking is a form of protection. So a talking circle is a mediation tool. The rules are that all people can speak until they're done. So this person talks a little bit, this person, you go all the way around, you keep going all the way until people are done. People speak and have the right to say whatever they want at their own pace. There is no crosstalk. When one person is talking, that's the only person that's talking, and the rest of the group is listening. The second recommendation is brainstorming, which is people throw out suggestions for improvements in a rapid fire format. They're not analyzed, they're written down, people just keep saying them, and then at the end when they make a decision, then they're analyzed. Now this is a very brief overview of 12 hours of training, but it was really interesting. And I appreciate having the opportunity to go to the Advanced Academy sessions. In anticipation of any questions regarding cost analysis, the total cost of the trip was $651.16. And that covered meals, registration, lodging, and fuel. So thank you again for this opportunity. I appreciate going to have additional education and training, as well as the added bonus of networking with my peer group from Minnesota and meeting some of Denise's friends. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions from the council? Councilor Ralphing?
Yes, Tamara, I have one I wrote down. You indicated in the first section they talked about recruiting new election officials because we're having trouble, recruiting anymore. What did you come up with a solution, or did you just identify the problem?
Well, there's several. There's going to be more advertisement. There's going to be using social media to reach out to students, advertising at colleges, government classes. If the students are old enough, they can participate. One thing that some of the smaller municipalities do is they provide meals for all their election workers. I don't think we do that here, and I think that'd be really kind of hard to budget that, but they do that in Minnesota to some of the communities.
Thank you. Councilor Urfenbach?
I just wanted to say thank you to Tamara. I know how important continuing education is to you, and I appreciate your willingness to do it and your willingness to report back to us. It's important to us to know what you're doing, so I appreciate your work. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you, Jim. Any
other items to bring up at this time? Councilor Staggers?
Tamara,
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
That's okay. Do we have any plans to try to get more people involved in elections making it more professional, or not?
Well, those would be some really good questions. Lori Hogstead, City Clerk, would be better prepared to answer those than I, and I can check with her and ask her to get back with you if you'd like.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.